Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming virtually in person. It's really exciting to get to reconnect with the TCD community. I used to sit in those chairs and not too long ago, but and thrilled to get to reconnect since I was a student there and I got my certificate with TCD, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to share what we're working on here at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. 1 second. I'm just going to mute and ask my colleague to speak a little quieter. 1 second. Awesome. Thank you for letting us get the tech and everything organized. And I'm excited to get to share what some of our research and our approach here at Cincinnati Zoo. So I'm going to do an introduction to what we focus on here in our coexistence impact program at the Cincinnati Zoo and share some pathways for conservation action that I hope will apply for you no matter where you work, which species or habitat or sustainability issue and landscape you might work with. Really, it's all about people, and we all are people or talk to people about our work. So I hope this presentation will be relevant to you. And I'll also share a few examples to get the conversation going. And I really will welcome questions or comments at the end. So at the Cincinnati Zoo, we are based in Cincinnati, Ohio. If you got on I-75 there in Gainesville and drive north for 13 hours, then get off, you'd get here, you'd get to me here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And with my team formation 2.5 years ago and my starting here at the zoo, we're really trying to extend our reach and grow our impact here at the zoo. Here are just some of the species and locations of projects that we work with amazing partners around the world to help save wildlife, whether they are more local species and ways we can help migratory songbirds and pollinators like monarch butterflies, to others more afield and trickling down the watershed to down there in Florida, like Florida manatees and coral reefs. Then we are working in Brazil with an organization around giant anteaters and giant armadillos, as well as in Africa, many projects around African predators like the lions I have in my background, where I got my start working with communities and understanding how people do the hard work of coexisting with wildlife. We also work on projects around giraffe and primates like gorillas and bonobos. And more recently, I've been getting much more involved in projects in India and Thailand around Asian elephants. And so here's just a quick snapshot of some of the projects I'll share, some highlights around how we can rally people to take action locally and globally. And we do that with active storytelling, wanting to bring people up close to animals. And that's why people love going to zoos, because you can see animals that you might not see every day, or you might see them in a way you wouldn't normally see them, because we want people to get close enough to care. That's our vision here at Cincinnati Zoo. And it's my job to then say, you're inspired, you've had that connection moment. How do we invite people to join us to help save them and take more sustainable actions and really help conservation? So our vision in order to be able to do that is by promoting coexistence so that the Cincinnati Zoo can help facilitate a brighter future for both wildlife and people. And so our simple theory of change, if any of you have taken Lynn Branch's class, the results chain, our concept is we want to advance our work and promote conservation leadership and really just focus on how we can increase impact through active collaboration, so that we can inspire our audiences and communities, whether they're here in Cincinnati or around the world, to help save species and create healthy landscapes. We do this because it's all connected, and my emphasis around people is because we can't just focus on the biology of what one species needs. The biological community and the diversity of species is very much interconnected with social issues like segregation issues, distribution of resources, whether that's wealth, food, access to education, or even the structure of the landscape and its heterogeneity. And all of these interconnected forces are important layers and drivers of whether or not sustainability is possible, whether conservation and sustainable development is moving forward in the right direction or the direction that we seek in our projects. And so it's important we consider all of these layers because it's all connected. And so our focus here at Cincinnati Zoo is to recognize that community members, people, are the drivers of conservation. Here are the mamas in Kenya, who I mentioned earlier, that helped drive me and help inspire me to learn about what it really is to coexist with wildlife. And I was lucky enough to get to work with them and do my master's research working with them. And now a closer example of how we drive community action. This is an example of a garden in Cincinnati, just next to the zoo, in an urban Black community that's very under-resourced. We heard a call from the community members saying we have this gravel, large, little bit grassy, but unusable field. What can we do with it? And we worked with the community members to design the biggest urban learning garden in the country. This is an urban learning garden next to an elementary school. Again, one that's very under-resourced, but the kids in this school get to use this garden, grow plants, learn about that growth, and grow food that they get to take home, all because the community drove it and said that's what they wanted. And overall, for all of our work, we try to have coexistence be our focus. And how we define coexistence are around these four mechanisms, or our goal statements of how we can create impact for wildlife in reducing the threats that they face or enabling a healthy habitat for them to live in. How do we mobilize more audiences, more people to get involved? Not one person is going to solve conservation issues, but more and more people being involved will crowdsource, will allow for more efficient involvement and enable us to get somewhere towards our goals faster. We work on elevating our partners and being more of an active leader in working with our partners to make sure we're leveraging resources to support their needs. And we're promoting environmental justice because we want to make sure we are being just in hearing what community members need, those who live in the landscapes or maybe interact with or get in conflict with the wildlife we're trying to save, so that we're not just promoting the wildlife's needs with the impact goal and to the detriment of people. We need to make sure that environmental justice is a major component of our structure for our programs. And just some examples of how we're doing this. Here's another aerial view of that urban learning garden I mentioned, and ways we promote impact. And with our model garden, now over 3,400 people have registered and built more gardens in our region to help us create habitat for songbirds and pollinators and healthy landscapes with less fertilizer and chemicals that could be unhealthy for people too. We mobilize audiences both near and far. Here we have several staff members that went to Kenya to work with the ranger teams there and really get more involved in supporting what the rangers who are on the front lines of helping people coexist with wildlife and responding when conflict happens. To more locally, we sponsor the Cincinnati region's Lights Out program, which is part of the Audubon Institute, and ways that people all around the world are invited to turn off their outdoor lights during the fall and spring migration seasons so that we can be more welcoming and safe for songbirds as they migrate through the landscape. We elevate and leverage our partners with a variety of examples, but here we have two SAFE programs, which is part of the Zoo and Aquarium Association, AZA's program to rally zoos and do more together, including our North American Monarch program and the Lion King Lion program, conservation program, with the Protect the Pride initiative that if you saw that movie when it came out in 2019, I was lucky enough to get to be involved in the campaign to try to get as many people who saw the movie to do something for lions and the African communities to do the hard work of living with them. And lastly, we are working towards helping towards environmental justice with a coexistence fellowship program. We started a fellowship program last year, and here are our first 4 fellows from Brazil, Bahamas, Kenya, and Kentucky, somebody local as well. And they are co-mentored by me and Dr. Mahi Puri, a coexistence scientist, and another alum of UF. So it's an amazing network that you all are a part of by being part of the TCD program. So that was a quick intro to some of the focus of projects that we do here at Cincinnati Zoo. Now I want to share with you some of these pathways to get involved and inspire people when you are talking about your projects, inviting people to get involved. And so what's the point of conservation messages? We might have multiple points when we're telling a story, when we're describing what we're working hard on. We might want to inspire our audiences. We might want to relay information, promote empathy, and help people feel something. But for me, I focus on how we change behavior, because conservation is a verb. It requires people to do something. And so inviting people to take action is an essential part of it. So whether you want to write something down if you have a notebook near you or on your phone, or just think for a moment, I would want to encourage you to think about what's a conservation problem that you care about. And is there an action that anyone can do to help with that conservation issue? Would anyone want to write in the chat for those of you who are turning in virtually? Or Susanna, do you want to unmute? Anyone have an example they'd want to share with the group? What's a problem you care about? Yeah, John, thank you.
I got it. Global warming.
Global warming.
Climate change, let's put it that way. It's a very concerning one here in Florida, of course.
Of course, it is. Thank you so much. Anyone else have an example of something that they are concerned about? I see some writing in the chat. Karen says wastefulness, buying too much, overconsumption.
Mass extinction.
Mass extinction, biodiversity loss, all very important. Well, thank you so much for those examples. I just want to invite you to, whether you think of, keep one of those in mind or one that's personal to you, keep it in mind as I go through the next series of slides, because I hope it will help you to think about how you can talk about that issue when you're talking about it with someone else. Like I already said, conservation is a verb. To me, it means behavior change. They're synonymous because we're inviting people to do something. Or maybe they're already doing this behavior, but we're trying to encourage them to do it more. And we can use social science research from a variety of disciplines, whether it's psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics. The list is long, and that's great news for us, because we can then lean on those fields to find the right tools or frames to be able to invite people in and hopefully motivate more action. And whenever we're talking about an issue we care about, we are selecting a frame. The words we're using are influencing how we tell that story. And those frames can influence whether or not you actually invite and influence someone to get to action. Here's a table that just shows a variety of ways that you could probably talk about the same thing, but using different words. And I emphasize this, whether you're saying, going to you, John, stopping all carbon emissions is unachievable, or let's break down reducing carbon emissions into realistic steps. Ways you can make things accessible, friendly, convenient, observable. There's a variety of tools that can help us in that reframing. And I share this with this audience because as scientists, as people who are very familiar with the topic you're probably studying or have been involved in for a long time, you can really get more and more comfortable with using the same language over and over. And that language is more comfortable for you and may not effectively reach your target audience. And that's why we have to intentionally choose to reframe to reach an audience, because we have diverse people that we're talking to. Diverse people means that some people take a different pathway to get to the outcome we're trying to influence them to get to. Some people might need to have a high motivation or care about an issue, and others might need to know the process of how and develop an intention. And both are different but valid ways to invite someone to get to action. And there are so many social science theories out there that help interpret these behaviors and what works. Dozens, if not hundreds. Here are just a few snapshots: elaboration likelihood model, knowledge deficit model, diffusion of innovation theory. Great news, I'm not forcing you all to join the semester-long class that we could do this on. We're just going to do a quick summary of some of the consistent themes across these social theories, using just one as our guide. Hope theory from John Snyder says that there are two important drivers that enable people to get to action and have hope so that they will get there. People need willpower and way power. First, you start the story with a spark or a hook or a did you know? But there might be barriers in front of someone preventing them to get to action. So it's our job to cultivate willpower and way power. You might have a lot of willpower, care about an issue, or feel connected to it. Let's go back to climate change again. You might care a lot and know that it's daunting and huge, but you might not know how to do it. You might not have a lot of way power. And that can mean you're hopeless and not take action. Alternatively, someone might have a lot of way power for an action. Let's take a more simple one, recycling. Recycling, you need to know how to do it. But if someone doesn't have motivation or interest in the topic, the willpower, they might not take the time to do it. And so we're going to dive deeper into some components of will and way power. The quick start is that way power is, there's a variety of ways that you can invite someone to take action. And since we have diverse audiences, we can't just hope that every person's going to be willing, interested, or even able to do one behavior. And here are 12 different high-level categories of behaviors that I wrote in this paper after taking Lynn Branch's class as part of my TCD certificate, exploring the ways that we can create a menu of options to make sure we're inviting people to take action and recognizing someone who might want to talk to their politician and influence in that way might be different than someone who wants to do community science and go out and record what birds they're seeing. So if we only present one behavior to people, it's no surprise that sometimes people say, no, thank you, or I can't, or I don't have access to those resources to be able to do that. And so here, I just wanted a quick pause to share that there's a variety of ways, and it's our responsibility to ensure we're providing that menu to invite more people to be involved. But the main point of this Pathways presentation is to look at the willpower and how we can reframe to reach different people. And there are 10 big themes that I found in my research across all those social science theories about what works to reach different audiences based on those researchers' patterns that they've interpreted. And so I'm going to take you through these 10, and there's a little bit of audience participation. So for those of you who are live, you can raise your hands when I tell you, or those of you who are virtual, you can do the raise hand or reaction function if that works, or you can type in the chat. There's going to be 4 questions, and I'm going to read 3 statements each time. Your job is to think through them as I read them and say which one most matches your perspective or clicks with your identity. Is it A, having information about environmental problems is enough to make me act in more environmentally friendly ways? Is it B, I am concerned about species extinction? Or is it C, being part of the natural world is an important part of my self-image? Feel free to type in the chat if you're for the virtual friends, but those of you in person or using the reactions button for those not virtual, do you identify with A, having information helps you to act more environmentally friendly? Is it B, I'm concerned about species extinction? No. Or C, being part of the natural world? Ooh, getting more hands raised at that one. Thank you. Awesome. And online, we got some C's, mostly C's, and I'm not surprised about that given our audience here. Let me explain why. A, that knowledge is a pretty straightforward concept or frame of inviting people with more information to turn on their brains and understand why this is an issue. Or it's simply put in this visual, you're wanting to get people to get in their car at the red dot and do the action in a pretty straightforward road just to get to the green dot. And more information about why this is a problem and what we can do about it is important to get some people to take action. Like I said earlier, recycling is an important example for this. And research shows that more people have that procedural knowledge of how to do it, they're more likely to recycle. And here's an example campaign that used it in the state of Michigan, know it before you throw it. And it was a public campaign where they talked about how to do it. And that influenced people to do it. Sadly, knowledge isn't everything. This is a prediction graph from the Yale Climate Institute, led by Kahan, the researcher there, on how people perceived the risk of climate change. And on the x-axis, we have their literacy of climate science and their perceived risk of climate science, which overall they predicted everyone will increase their perceived risk as they have more scientific literacy about climate change. But they split people into two groups based on their worldviews or their values. Fancy term up here for green, egalitarian, communitarian values, or people who first think, is this going to impact a community, my community? Where even with low literacy in understanding climate science, it's people who have the worldview of wondering about the climate impacts will have high perceived risks of it. In contrast to people who are hierarchical individualists, but are really people who are focused on, is this going to impact me first? And those people are predicted to have when they have low scientific literacy, to have a low perceived risk of climate change. But again, as that literacy goes up, their perceived risk should go up. And this is what they actually found. Notice that the green line for the prediction does align, but the blue line for people who first say, is climate change going to impact me? As they have a higher understanding of climate science, their perceived risk of it decreases. Wow. That goes against our entire scientific communication model of here's more information about this issue. Come on, here's even more information about it. And that's because some people are wearing glasses, lenses, where they interpret information in a different way than we might predict. This group is not receiving that information like the other group and then deciding to act based on it. They are perceiving it and then using a different frame in deciding what to do next. And so that's why this presentation isn't over. That's why we have to keep going through some more different frames, because different lenses work for different people. The next group, B, those of you who raise your hand for B, the attitude is an important factor or frame to think about cultivating in how we talk about conservation issues. And here, the visual model of this map is more of an adventure for your car ride. It's not a straight line on a road. You have to get people to feel and connect with the topic and go over some boulders or mountains in order to get people to feel and connect about how they understand this issue and what it relates to their beliefs. The Jane Goodall Institute example campaign that they did with a variety of species is a great example of attitudes, where they had a picture of an animal like this white rhino here, and just had the phrase, "Will you miss me?" over top of it. And you can see that's a very different frame than the previous one of, "This is how you recycle." This one, "Will you miss me?" asks the audience to reflect on, well, would I miss a white rhino if they were gone? And how does that relate to my beliefs about their value or their impact? And connecting with that is very important and a very different way to connect to your audience than those procedural knowledge messages. Lastly, most of the folks who raised their hand or wrote in, you raised your hand for this one, that you have strong personal norms or personal sense of responsibility or an environmental identity. I'm looping all of those together because it means you are self-driven, connected to environmental issues and environmental actions. And here you can see visually, you're riding a bike because you are driving yourself, you're doing it as an individual, and you are self-motivated to take this action. I like the example of, if you are identifying strong as an environmentalist and you just finished a can of soda, but you can't find a recycling bin anywhere. Have you ever found yourself carrying it around with you for a little bit longer rather than just throwing it away immediately? that willingness to continue doing something is related to your identity. And so an example campaign that does this, that's famous here in the United States, is the Forest Service Smokey the Bear, who always says, only you can prevent forest fires, putting that on the individual. Here's a more modern example campaign where they're trying to get more diverse people to ride their bike to work and be so safely. And so it's all sorts of different people. I don't know in what world a chef rides his bike with his knife out like that. That seems pretty terrifying to me, but it's also a hilarious campaign to then help people connect and see that I could ride my bike to work. And so helping connect to those individuals. All right, polling question number 2. Same concept, 3 statements, and think about which one most connects with your identity. Is it A, if it makes my community healthier, I would do more environmentally friendly things, actions. B, I think about how environmental problems will impact the activities my family or I can do. Or C, people should clean up the environment to help all species live. Do you most relate to A? Raise your hand or write in the chat. You got C coming in the chat. How about B? Oh, I see your raised hands. Thank you. Is there any B's? Awesome. And C. Help all species live. Oh, got some hands raised. And seeing several C's in the group. Think in the chat. Not surprised again by that. All 3 of those statements are represented here in this visual. Going down to our values phrase. Whether you think first about how is something going to impact the planet or an individual species or the environment, if that's you or all the people who picked C, that's biospheric boulevard or biospheric values. Think about the planet first. If you think about humanity overall or communities or future generations, that's altruistic avenue. And this is an urban landscape, a map with where at multiple roads you can take left or right, but you can still get to that same action when you use different roads to get there. The last one is the personal impact. Is this going to impact me or my family? And that's a value called egoistic values, or whether you think about yourself, the individuals first. All of these are valid, but I'll emphasize that most conservationists have biospheric values as their highest, thinking about impact on the planet or species. And yet, if we look at data from the United States, most people, high and above, most people have personal values first, those egoistic values. And so that's an explanation for why our conservation messages often land on deaf ears, because we use our values to frame what we think is important, and the audience might not connect with it. So it's our job as the experts and the professionals to reframe and talk about how species can also help people and their individuals. Conservation International, with their Nature is Speaking campaign, did this with a variety of videos with celebrities, each speaking for different parts of our planet. And all of those videos ended with the same phrase: nature doesn't need people, people need nature. If you're looking for a YouTube video to watch later, I recommend looking these up. The Harrison Ford video is quite funny because he has a very, very deep, scary Batman-like voice while talking about the ocean. Another organization that's quite great at using these value frames, if you're not familiar with them, is NOCI, the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. And they use values frames to ensure that we can reach people where they are in order to talk about climate change. All right, this is the 3rd question out of 4, so we're halfway there, friends. Which message most match with your perspective? Is it A, my friends or loved ones care about the planet? B, after I've practiced a new sustainable skill, I'm motivated to do it the next time I have a chance? Or C, I'm willing to make time to do environmentally friendly things, even if it takes longer? Feel free to chime in on the chat. I see a C coming in, but if you have an A, will you raise your hand if you connect with that? How about B? And oh yes, we got 4 hands in the room. And C? Oh, several hands. It's great. And I'll just take note here, it's a good thing if you want to raise your hand or say multiple ones work for you. That means multiple frames would work for you. So that's not a bad thing. Sometimes people get frustrated when I try to get them to just pick one. But you can see in our room and in this group, we have a variety. We've got A's and C's mostly on the chat online. Let's look at what that means. First, the A's and what our friends and family care about or people we get to hang out with. This is the opposite of the individual norms of getting on your bike. This one is represented by getting on the bus with your friends and family. These social or subjective norms of when we are motivated to do something because we can do it with other people is an important thing for us to think about, because many people don't choose to do an activity that's new for them if they have to do it alone. But if they get to do it with their family or with their kids or with their friends, they might enjoy doing that more and then get to pick up more friends along the way and influence more people to do that action. Another alum of the program I'll cite here and highlight Wilandria Chavez, who is an alum of the program and also now an assistant professor at Virginia Tech. Her amazing research for her PhD in the Amazon is a great example of the influence of social norms on people's actions. She did a huge study trying to influence people's consumption of bushmeat. She got coupons and even got a large grant to be able to subsidize people eating more chicken. She brought more chicken to the markets and provided it and asked the market stall owners to sell more chicken and gave those coupons out so people could get them freely. She hosted cooking nights where people could learn how to cook chicken and how to make it taste good. And all of that led to people eating a lot of chicken. But that didn't get people to reduce their bushmeat consumption. They just had chicken and bushmeat. But when she asked people to commit to eating less bushmeat and put a sign in front of their house, then they were committed to, and other people could see it with that sign. That's when they reduced how much bushmeat they consumed. So we are very social as a species, and it's important that we think about that when we talk about our conservation issues of how do we get it to be public, or how do we get people to be able to invite others to join us. For those of us who like to practice a skill in order to do it more often, you can see this is represented here with going to driving school and practicing driving and then getting your license. Some behaviors are more complicated, and so people need to learn how and feel a high sense of self-efficacy or a sense of your personal capacity to do something, having direct experience with it, or your perceived control of how much you can control doing this behavior. And all of that then can help you want to do the behavior more. Lots of tools can help people practice, but an example is the Seafood Watch program from Monterey Bay Aquarium, where they guide you in how to practice choosing sustainable fish options, whether you're at the store or a restaurant, and be able to then guide you through what's the best choice, what's a good alternative, and what are the fish to avoid. And by practicing that, people are then more likely more often to make better choices that are more sustainable fish for consumption. And lastly, we got the most C's in the room. Once you're committed to doing something, you'll do it, no matter how long it takes. That means you have behavioral intention. And here you can see in the visual, you're at the train station, and the train station is much closer to the action because research shows that when someone has an intention, that's a very good precursor and driver of whether they'll actually do the action. So here, that means you have your ticket, you're waiting until the train arrives, but you are committed to doing the action once the train arrives and your opportunity arises. I emphasize that because sometimes conservationists like to use self-reporting of behavioral intention as the surrogate for data about whether people actually do the behavior. But sometimes the train breaks down and you never have a chance to actually do it. And so then it's not a perfect surrogate because it's not going to be perfect data of how many people had intention and are waiting at the train station versus having the chance to do it and really taking action and doing that. Pledges, like I mentioned earlier, are very strong tools to try to get people to visually, mentally commit to, would I be willing to do that behavior? Oh yeah, I do. And that mental exercise helps you develop intention so that people are more likely to do it. This is an example from the Nature Conservancy, but really dozens of organizations use pledges, and I highly recommend it as a tool to help people cultivate thinking about doing something and then being willing to do so. All right, last question. Same concept. 3 statements. Which one do you most click with? Is it A, one or more of my fondest memories takes place somewhere in nature? B, if there's a positive story about saving wildlife, I like to follow it and see the happy ending. Or C, if someone I trust tells me about an environmental problem, I want to help them fix it. Now raise your hand if do you have A as your favorite. We got 5 in the room. We got A and C on the chat. Is it B? Got lots of A's in the chat. And then C. 1 C on the chat and 3 hands in the room, maybe 4. Awesome. Let's dive into what these mean. Your fond memories in nature are really important to who we are and what we're willing to do. But you can see here in this visual, it's not a straight line. It's when we cultivate a sense of place or a past experience, and maybe it's a recreation thing we like to do in nature, it's very influential, whether you're whale watching with your family or camping and playing outside, or whether you're connected to a specific landscape or seascape that you are very connected to, or a recreation activity that you love to do outside. So then you're driven to help the landscapes there so you can keep doing that. Our sense of place is powerful, but more amorphous as something we can force on people to experience. But we can use it in our frames. The organization RARE, all capital letters, does this very well with their community pride campaigns, where they work in specific communities to develop conservation messaging campaigns that are culturally relevant and thus motivating to that specific community. If you want another YouTube video later to look up, I highly recommend the Size Matters campaign that they did in an island in the Bahamas, where they are trying to get people to not harvest lobster that are the wrong size and haven't gotten the chance to reproduce yet. And they could have used a knowledge frame and just put up a lot of signs around the island saying, this is the appropriate size, don't harvest it if it's this size, the end. But instead, what they did, cultivating that sense of place, is they worked with a local famous musician, and they had that famous musician write a song called Size Matters and talk about that in a funny song that is really a good pop song. You want to listen to it. And it also is a little bit of a sexual innuendo, so it makes people laugh. But you're learning about lobster and lobster sizes, and people are choosing to listen to it or asking to listen to it. And I'll warn you, it will get stuck in your head. So, but I think you should look it up if you want an entertaining moment. We are very emotional as a species, and emotions can be very powerful, as visualized here with, we're not in a vehicle, we're on a hot air balloon. And you can relatively quickly get blown from wherever you are to start towards the action. But I want to bring up emotion with caution because it's hard to control at times. You might be wanting people to feel happy or feel awe and excitement, but maybe you accidentally trigger someone with different past experience to feel anger or sadness. And that can mean they could get blown off course. And so emotions are powerful, but we want to be cautious and think about how we cultivate them. But when we think about any story that is famous and people love, emotions are a part of it. Let's go to a Disney movie. Any Disney movie you've seen starts usually towards the beginning with something really sad happening, because that helps us get more invested in the main character and their story arc and their experiences so that we want to keep going. And emotions can be powerful. Shout out to another group of researchers at UF, Susan Jacobson, who's retired, and her team with Nia Morales, who is now there in the WEC department. They interviewed and surveyed lots of students at UF after watching very happy videos for conservation and more sad or scary ones. Whether it's this David Attenborough video of what a wonderful world and beautiful scenery, or this example, very sad one with a camera trap footage where you can hear elephants being shot by poachers. It even makes me physically feel something just saying that sentence. So that's how much emotion can influence us. But for after each time the students watched these videos, they asked, how much time might you be willing to donate out of 0 hours up to 8 hours to volunteer for this cause? And how much money might you be willing to donate to support this cause from $0 and then in $5 increments up to $40? And both negative videos and positive ones got reactions from people and willingness to donate. But in their study, the positive videos got significantly more donation willingness, both time and money, but both were strong. And I just, again, emphasize there is a time and place maybe for the sad or the scary stories to get people interested, but we have to be cautious or intentional about when and how we use emotions. Lastly, last path, whether it's an expert that you trust or someone in your network that you trust, sometimes people are quick to connect. And I'm representing that here in this visual with social media. Sometimes you just get picked up over here and dropped off at the action, and you never really turned your brain on to understand why. And that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean people are dumb. What it is people are busy. And not everyone has the time to hear your whole thesis, preamble paragraphs about the issues, about how cool this species is, about all the influencing factors. But if they trust you, or they trust your spokesperson, they might just get up and do it and help, and then move on with whatever else they're doing in their busy lives. And that is important as we think about how do we get great spokespeople. You are a spokesperson when you talk about your research or the issues you care about. I'm a spokesperson for the zoo, and when I want to get people to listen to some of our topics, I wear a shirt with the zoo brand on it because people trust that. Or maybe we have celebrity spokespeople. Leonardo DiCaprio is not a climate change scientist, but he does talk about it a lot, and he's getting and influencing some people to connect to it in ways that a climate scientist might not. And so we have to think intentionally about who people trust and listen to in order to get the people who are ripe and quick to connect and willing to just say, sure, I'll do that action, but don't have the time to turn on their brain and know why it's important. And that's fine. That's totally fine. And so we have to be intentional about that. And when we assess it, we have to think about how much does our target audience already know about this topic? How much do they already understand it or not? Because if they already know a lot, then who the speaker or the spokesperson is doesn't matter as much. But if they don't have time to know a lot, if the listener perceives that the speaker to be an expert or to be a trusted spokesperson, they will agree and willingly jump in and take action. The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is one many years ago that I bring up as an example. Those viral videos of people pouring ice on their heads, those weren't PSAs where they talked about all the details of the terrible ALS disease. Those were viral videos where people were just inviting more and more people to get involved. And by doing so, getting more and more people to donate for this cause that has major impact on their efforts towards a cure for that disease. So we get to be intentional as conservationists of when are people ripe just to say, sure, I'll jump in. This should be fun. I trust you, or I trust this spokesperson. Woohoo! We did it. You went on this journey with me and you tried out all 10 of these pathways. And thank you for your patience and willingness to explore all 10 with me. And I hope that they were useful for you as you think about the range of frames or the layers of the wording we get to use when we talk about our primary favorite conservation issue or the passions that we have in order to reach people to take more action and not just use the words that work for us and influence us. And all of this enables us to really work towards a goal of conservation goals, whatever those might be, and how we start a story with a spark and really intentionally think about how we might cultivate willpower, piecing together a couple of those frames or pathways that we've gone through. What are the way power? How else do we cultivate people's confidence that they know how to get involved so that they do take action and then influence others to join in and have that social reinforcement so that the threats to the species or the landscapes or communities are reduced so that we can achieve our lofty global conservation goals. And all of those components can be components of a good story. And my advice to you is when you're starting to think about how do I tell people about my conservation project, whether it's your family when you go home or bigger audiences when you're ready to talk about it, when you can make your target audience a main character, they'll be more likely to want to join you and take action. And then the other components of the why and the what, those willpower and way power, are very important as we consider how do we invite and engage people to get involved. And that hope theory is important. And in academia or at UF, or all over, when we talk to experts, we love to start with a lot of background info, a very long, well-referenced introduction section, more supporting details, and then end with the bottom line. But most people in the world don't have time for that. So when you don't know how much time you have with someone, start with the bottom line. Start with the target action that you're wanting to invite people in, because they might be quick to act and just say, sure. Or you might have a little more time with them and you can tell them some more supporting details. But when we talk to new audiences, start strategically and invite people in that way. So if you were writing it down or just theoretically, just for you to think about, I hope these 10 frames are useful as you think about how do you be more active and engaging in our language to invite people in and make the actions more accessible and related to our audience's interests versus using our own. So I'm going to end with just a couple examples of how we use these models here at Cincinnati Zoo, and then I'll invite your questions. One example, I work with the organization Proyecto TT in Colombia on their cotton top tamarin conservation program, the very cute little monkeys here in northern Colombia. And the pet trade is one of the biggest drivers of their current critically endangered status, because a lot of people in this rural community region of northern Colombia want to help take care of these tamarins. They see them, they think that they need to be cared for and taken care of at home. Bored kids like to go out and try to get them, hit them with a slingshot and take them home. But at the same time, they have a lot of dogs in their community or even on their farm that they don't take a lot of care of, because there's a cultural perception in that region that dogs are kind of dumb, but they're good to have around as kind of an alarm system. So the Amiguao program, which is amigo plus a good bark in Spanish, is a great program that teaches kids how to train dogs with the help of zookeepers that come from the US to come down and train kids how to train dogs, to cultivate a relationship with those dogs and provide a direct alternative of an animal that does need help in being cared for, so that they leave the tamarins alone. So it's a win-win in terms of animal welfare for the dogs. The children are able to connect with animals as they desire in their cultural values, and the tamarins are left alone to thrive in the wild. Another example I'm working with partners in India on is we're developing a video game right now. And I never thought I'd say I'm working on creating a video game, but we're trying to incentivize reducing elephant conflict, which is happening in Northeast India, mostly at the fault at the hands of bored teenage boys. So we're creating a video game for their Android phones where they get to practice fighting generic evil, which are really characters, kind of amorphous characters doing the behavior that these boys love to do, which is mob the elephants and try to touch them. Quite dangerous, both for them and for the elephants. where then they get to practice doing more elephant-friendly behaviors, compete with each other on their phones and still get that out of it, and yet reduce and incentivize that reduction in the causes of elephant conflict. So stay tuned. We're about to launch the beta version of the game, and then hopefully soon we'll be able to test how actively the boys like to use it in Northeast India, and whether it will help reduce these incidents of conflict with them and elephants. I work with partners in the Congo on ways to study how people are consuming bushmeat and or just interacting and going into the forest in their very, very rural villages, which it is their right to go and look for resources when they have so little resources to start with. But we're working on ways to interview community members and get to know their needs and interests so that we can hopefully find alternatives so that they don't go into the forest to consume gorillas and bonobos. And one or two more examples around how we are working on building an education center with the Maasai elders in southern Kenya in order to, following the lead of these amazing Maasai elders about the design that they want. Here, they're holding these shields where they are elders in their community, where they remember making shields in this traditional way, but younger generations were never taught that. So this education center is going to be a site for elders to share their knowledge with younger generations based on their desire to make sure that those cultural values aren't lost. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me and letting me share some of what we're doing here at the Cincinnati Zoo, and share also some of my nerdy research about ways we can get more people to take action. I very much welcome you to reach out if you have direct questions or want to chat, but I'll welcome any questions right now. Thanks.